Hi there, Andre here from Peak Motorcycles. In this video I'd like to talk about a new bike, and the bike is the new Royal Enfield Himalayan Scram 411 or 411. It's based on the Royal Enfield Himalayan, but is a stripped back version with styling closer to what I've seen on the Royal Enfield 411 flat track bikes that they use at the Royal Enfield Slide School. It's not one of those, of course. It does have a 17-inch instead of a 19-inch rear wheel, and it has a front brake, which is probably more useful for day-to-day use. The bike itself, I quite like the look of it. And to build on the success of the Himalayan, which I have ridden, and it's certainly proven itself as a go anywhere, do anything, albeit at a leisurely pace, adventure bike. I do have a few issues with the Scram though. The first of which is the name. I'm sure it's fine as a contraction of Scrambler, but Scram, it's the sort of thing that over here people would shout at people to ask them to go away, and not particularly politely. I've watched the launch video and I've read the marketing, and well, you be the judge, and these are direct quotes. Today's world is full of opportunities and obstacles too. It demands constant switching between modes, work and play, night and day, rough and smooth, stop and go, fast and slow. This is no cosmetic crossover or pumped up street bike. This is a brand new subspecies. Scram mode is about navigating the urban game of snakes and ladders. And then there's a catchphrase, which is ready, set, scram. I'll be honest, I don't really know what any of that means. And in all the marketing, these have been delivered in a very straight, serious manner, as if they are meaningful. I thought the bike looks fun, playful if you will, and that just didn't align with the marketing I'd seen. And I'm sorry to say that it did make me want to dig my fingernails into the palms of my hands. That said, that's probably my problem and no one else's, so feel free to ignore me. The bike itself is essentially the same 411cc Himalayan platform on the Harris Performance frame. It's available now in India and at some point in the rest of the world. It's available in 7 colours, 3 that are black, or I think they call it graphite, with either blue, yellow or red elements. The coloured pieces come in on the tank, the side panels and also the rim tape, but otherwise the bikes are very similar. There's also 4 premium colours for £100 more here in the UK, called Blazing Black, Skyline Blue, White Flame and Silver Spirit. And if you want to see what those colourways look like, you can look them up on the website. I haven't seen one in person, so I can't tell you much about that. However, as most of the coverage I've seen so far compares it with the Himalayan adventure bike and suggests that the Scram is the urban sibling, so I thought I'd do something different. And this comes down to what is an adventure bike. I think an adventure bike is what you do with it, not which bike it is or what the bike looks like. There's people like Round the World Roxy taking her Fireblade over the Himalayan passes, and Nathan the Postman Millward, who rode an Australian postie bike back to the UK from Australia. There is also plenty of very, very clean GSs which sit in immaculate condition in garages with minimal use and are certainly rarely used for adventures. So for a bit of fun, I thought I'd do a different comparison, and I thought it best that I do it with one of my own bikes. So I'd like to compare the new Royal Enfield Scram 411 with the genre-defining BMW R1250GS. My bike is a rally, and it's the same bike that BMW use for their off-road skills course here in the UK. I know they're making the adventure version as well, with a bigger tank, more bodywork, and well, more everything, especially weight. But it's the same engine, and BMW don't use them for the off-road skills course, so I'll stick with my non-adventure R1250GS. First up is the engine. Everyone loves figures and data for a comparison between bikes, and the Scram is, as I've mentioned, a 411cc air-cooled single, making just over 24 brake horsepower and about 32 newton meters of torque. My 1250GS is a 1254cc liquid-cooled flat twin, makes 134 brake horsepower and 143 newton meters of torque. So not much to say here. I'm not sure how this can go any other way than to BMW. That Boxer is the result of 40 years of development, and though anyone coming from a silky Japanese 4 probably thinks it's a tractor, I think they're great, and I've had a BMW Boxer engined bike since I first started riding. The next key element is the gearbox. So on my GS it's a 6-speed, 1 down, 5 up, with a quick shifter both going up and down, and on the Scram it's a 5-speed conventional gearbox. Again, I think this is a little bit old school. I think they could have at least gone with a 6-speed box, and again I think the GS is ahead of the game. At least on the Royal Enfield the gear lever is on the left side of the bike. So next up is the electronics, and I think Royal Enfield have made some real progress here over the Himalayan. The Himalayan dash is fine, but it does look a little dated now. Royal Enfield have added a new dash and trip and navigation as standard, at least here in the UK. And also 2-channel ABS, which I think is now a legal requirement. If you're not sure what the trip and navigation is, it's a small colour display on the dash that links to your phone and provides directions. I've not tried it, but by all accounts, it's not a bad solution. And if you look up on YouTube the Royal Enfield video for the trip and navigation, you'll see the road that I live on, because they actually came here to Edale in the Peak District to film the bikes riding up the hill through the green fields. Don't be fooled by the fact that they're riding on the right-hand side of the road. It's definitely here in Edale. Except for the high desert things, I think that's probably up in Ladakh. Now the electronics on my GS, it's got a TFT dash, hill start assist, cornering ABS. Actually, I think pretty much if there's any electronics you can get on a bike, the GS has it. The only thing I don't have on mine is a heated seat and a heated pillion seat, but that is an option. So unfortunately, I think the GS wins that as well, and so far I think the GS is 3-0 up. So one thing with the Scram is that it's been given this urban reputation because it's dropped from a 21-inch front wheel on the Himalayan to the 19-inch on the Scram. And further to my earlier comments on what makes an adventure bike, I'm not sure this is an urban thing. I guess most enduro and trail bikes have a 21-inch front, but 19-inch is still pretty big. And to compare it with the GS, this one's a tie. My R1250GS has a 19-inch front wheel and a 17-inch rear wheel. Another key element for adventure riding, or certainly going on rough roads, is the suspension, and in particular the ground clearance. So here the Scram is 10mm down at the front from the Himalayan at only 190mm, while at the back this stays at 180mm. This was a surprise to me, but this actually makes it the same as the GS at the front, but it does have 20mm less suspension travel at the back. This would make it a win for the GS, or so it would seem until you look at the ground clearance. And the GS has got 185mm of ground clearance, and the Scram a rather useful 200. And if I had to choose between 20mm less suspension travel and 15mm more ground clearance, I think on the suspension and ground clearance, that's another one for the Scram. The next thing for travel is range. The GS has a 20-litre tank to the Scram's 12.5 litres. However, the GS only does around 47 miles to a gallon and the Scram does over 90. So despite the smaller tank, the Scram, on paper at least, has a range of 250 miles to the GS's rather poor 207. That, coupled with the fuel cost, is another win for the Scram. There is now a glimmer of hope here. So we can look at weights. The Scram has a wet weight of 196 kilos, which is not a light bike, but the GS is 249. I know the GS has a lot more power, but that's no help when you're trying to pick the bike up with the engine off. The Scram definitely isn't a light bike, but perhaps there are options to reduce this weight further. And with that, the Scram pulls level. The crowd are on their feet, which doesn't help, as the next thing I'd like to compare is the seat height. The Scram has a seat height of 795mm, which is 55mm lower than the GS. I know that isn't a thing for tall people, but excluding people from riding a bike because they don't feel safe on it is never a good thing. So I think that slightly lower seat height is a win for the Scram, and the crowd goes wild. And the last up is probably the elephant in the room, and that is the cost. So ignoring the running and servicing costs, a Scram in the UK is likely to be around £4,700. That might seem shocking to you in India, but an R1250GS TE costs around £17,500, nearly 4 times more. And that's before you start adding extras. And that is a huge amount of money in this comparison. So I'm afraid this seals the victory for the Scram. This is all a joke, of course. I'm not suggesting for a moment that the Scram 411 is a better adventure bike than the GS. It isn't. What I hope I've highlighted is that the Scram looks like it has the range, ground clearance, wheel sizes and reliability to be a very, very good motorcycle. And to tag it as either an urban or an adventure motorcycle is probably doing it a disservice. I don't know when these bikes are going to arrive in the UK, but I really look forward to them when they do. That's it. That's my comparison of a Royal Enfield Himalayan Scram 411 with a BMW R1250GS. I hope this has been interesting and useful, and if it has, maybe I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.